Have you ever been called selfish by the one person who's supposed to love you unconditionally, just for standing your ground? That's exactly what happened to me when I refused to pay for dinner for my own family. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. I'm Taya Rowan, 28, and I've been living on my own for a few years now. I work long hours at a marketing firm, and life has been a mix of exhausting days and small victories. My mom, Darla Rowan, has always been controlling, making even simple decisions feel like battles. She has a way of twisting situations to make me feel guilty for things that aren't my responsibility, and I've spent most of my life walking on eggshells around. That evening, my family decided to go out for dinner. It wasn't a special occasion, just a casual family gathering at a new Italian place my cousin recommended. I was looking forward to it as a rare chance to relax, enjoy good food, and catch up with everyone. Little did I know that dinner would turn into a moment I would never forget. As soon as we sat down, my mom started chatting about how everyone should pitch in for the bill. I didn't think much of it at first, assuming it would be split evenly or that we could figure it out. But then, without warning, Darla turned to me and said, "Taya, you should cover this one. You earn enough, don't you?" I froze. I had just gotten my first paycheck from a big project, and I was proud of managing my finances. But I wasn't about to let my mom guilt me into paying for something I hadn't agreed to. I gently said, "Mom, I don't think that's fair. I didn't plan to cover dinner tonight." Her reaction was immediate and brutal. She glared at me, raising her voice in front of the entire table. "You're such a selfish and greedy thing, Taya. I can't believe you won't help your own family." My cheeks burned with humiliation. My aunts, uncles, and cousins shifted uncomfortably, and I could feel their awkward glances. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to sink under the table and escape the weight of her words. But in that moment, a strange clarity hit me. I realized that this wasn't just about dinner. It was about a lifetime of manipulation and guilt. Darla had always used money, praise, and control to get what she wanted, and I had spent too long bending to her will. Driving home that night, I felt a mixture of anger, hurt, and determination. I knew I couldn't let her continue to dictate my life. That evening became the turning point. It wasn't just about refusing to pay for dinner. It was the moment I decided to take control of my own life, to set boundaries, and to stop letting my mother's words define my worth. From that night on, everything began to change. I learned how to stand up for myself, even against someone who was supposed to love me unconditionally, and slowly, I began reclaiming my sense of self. The restaurant was bustling, filled with laughter, clinking glasses, and the aroma of pasta and fresh bread. My family had already chosen a corner table, and everyone seemed excited to catch up. As menus were passed around, Darla leaned over and casually mentioned that I should handle the bill since I made more than everyone else. I took a deep breath and shook my head. "I didn't plan for that tonight," I said quietly, trying to keep my tone polite. I hoped that would be enough to stop the conversation, but it wasn't. Darla's face hardened, and she raised her voice just enough for the whole table to hear. "Taya, you're really selfish. I can't believe you wouldn't help out your family when you can easily afford it." The words hit me like a punch. I could feel my ears burning and my hands tightening around the menu. I looked around at everyone else. My cousins shifted in their seats, looking awkward. My uncle avoided eye contact, and my aunt fidgeted with her napkin. None of them spoke up, leaving me to face the shame alone. For a moment, I felt completely exposed, like every eye was judging me. I kept my voice steady, though my chest felt tight. "I just can't do it this time," I repeated. It wasn't a lie. It wasn't even about the money. It was about finally refusing to bend under her constant pressure. Darla scoffed, leaning back in her chair with a smirk, as if she had won. Her words echoed in my mind, and I could feel a mix of anger and hurt building inside me. It wasn't just about dinner anymore. It was about years of being put down and manipulated. By the time the waiter brought our meals, a quiet tension had settled over the table. Conversation had slowed, laughter had faded, and I could sense everyone treading lightly. I picked at my food, tasting nothing, my mind spinning with thoughts of what I would do next. For the first time, I realized that my refusal, small as it was, had sparked something bigger. I wasn't sure yet what it would become, but a tiny, persistent seed of defiance and the need to set things right had been planted. I wasn't going to let that moment pass without figuring out how to reclaim my dignity. The rest of the night dragged on in silence. My family chatted in murmurs, avoiding my eyes, and Darla occasionally threw sharp comments under her breath. I stayed calm, hiding the fire growing inside me. That evening ended not with laughter, but with a heavy sense of betrayal and a quiet determination that I couldn't ignore. I left the restaurant feeling a strange mix of shame and empowerment, knowing that this incident was only the beginning of something I had to face, and that I wouldn't let it go unnoticed. The drive home was silent except for the hum of the engine and the occasional flash of streetlight. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than usual, and I couldn't stop replaying Darla's words over and over. Her voice wasn't just angry. It was sharp, cutting through me in a way that left a hollow ache. As I sat in traffic, memories came flooding back. I remembered the countless times she had insisted I pay for things I hadn't agreed to, or cover favors for relatives, all while making me feel guilty if I hesitated. There were birthdays I had funded, vacations I had helped with, and even small gestures like covering lunch for her friends. Each time, she framed it as a moral obligation, and if I resisted, she reminded me I was selfish. I saw myself as a teenager, balancing part-time jobs, desperate to save for college, and still being coerced into buying expensive gifts for people who barely appreciated. I recalled her tense voice saying, "If you loved me, you'd help." Every time I tried to explain I couldn't afford it. At the time, I had complied, believing I was being responsible and caring, but now I realized I had been manipulated. Even more vividly, I remembered evenings sitting in my room after fights with her, feeling drained, angry, and unsure why I always ended up apologizing. She had a way of twisting situations so that my efforts to stand up for myself seemed cruel or uncaring. Those old frustrations, once buried, resurfaced with force, mingling with the shame she had thrown at me tonight. I glanced at the rearview mirror and noticed the reflection of my own tired eyes. I barely recognized the version of myself that had bent to her every whim. Anger simmered alongside hurt. It was a strange mix of betrayal and awakening, realizing that the pattern I had endured for years wasn't normal, and I didn't have to continue it. By the time I pulled into my driveway, my mind was racing. The humiliation of the restaurant still stung, but beneath it, a spark of resolve was growing. I knew I couldn't erase the past, but I could start refusing the control she had always exerted over me. The emotional tension twisted in my chest, heavy yet strangely empowering, as I stepped out of the car, knowing this night had shifted something inside me. For the first time, I felt the beginnings of clarity. I understood the depth of the manipulation I had endured, and while the pain lingered, it carried with it a quiet promise. I wouldn't let anyone, not even my own mother, dictate my choices or my self-worth again. A few days after the restaurant incident, I found myself going through some old family papers while looking for a tax document. Among the stacks, I stumbled across letters and statements that didn't make sense at first. They were about my mom's siblings, my aunts and uncles, and the money they had left her to manage. As I read further, my stomach dropped. The documents revealed that Darla had been making questionable financial decisions for years. Funds that were meant to be saved or invested responsibly had been shifted, spent, or hidden in ways that weren't disclosed to the other family members. It wasn't just negligence. It was deliberate mismanagement, and it was clear that she expected someone else to clean up the mess when the consequences caught up. Suddenly, everything clicked. The restaurant incident, the constant guilt over small sums, the way she manipulated family gathering. It wasn't only about control or pride. It was about money, about ensuring she remained the center of attention while keeping others under pressure to bail her out. Every public shaming, every subtle accusation, was part of a pattern to dominate family finances and maintain her image. I felt a wave of betrayal unlike anything I had experienced before. Not only had she tried to humiliate me in front of everyone, but she had also assumed I would be responsible for fixing a problem that was never mine to solve. The realization made me see her actions in a new light. Her charm, her demands, her outrage when I resisted. It was all a strategy to manipulate me into stepping into her role, to keep her unchallenged. For the first time, I truly understood the scope of her manipulation. This wasn't just emotional control. It was financial, psychological, and systematic. I felt anger burn through me, sharper than the embarrassment from the restaurant. I realized I had been entangled in a web of deceit and expectation that had been laid carefully over years, and now it was impossible to ignore. I sat in silence, staring at the papers, piecing together every moment I had been shamed or pressured. The patterns were undeniable. My mother had always framed her needs as family obligations, making me feel selfish if I resisted, and now I knew it had nothing to do with love or care. That night, a new determination took hold. This revelation was more than just shocking. It was liberating. Understanding her intentions gave me power. The betrayal hurt, but it also ignited a clarity that I hadn't felt before. I knew I needed to protect myself, reclaim control over my life, and ensure I wouldn't be used as her safety net any longer. The seed of defiance planted at the restaurant had grown, and now it had direction. The next evening, I found myself sitting in a quiet cafe, nervously stirring my coffee as I waited for Lenny Fox. Lenny and I had grown up together, sharing secrets, school lunches, and late-night talks about everything we didn't feel we could tell our family. She had a way of listening without judgment, and I knew I needed that kind of clarity now more than ever. When she arrived, she slid into the seat across from me, smiling, unaware of the storm brewing inside me. I took a deep breath and began to spill everything. How my mother had shamed me at the restaurant, the years of manipulation, and the discovery about her mishandling family finances. I tried to keep my voice steady, but parts of it broke as I recounted moments that had weighed on me for decades. Lenny didn't interrupt or offer empty reassurances. She just listened, nodding, her eyes steady and understanding. After I finished, she reached across the table and put her hand on mine. Taya, what your mom did isn't right. You've been pushed around your whole life, and none of it is your fault. You deserve to stand your ground. Hearing her words, I felt a strange release, a weight lifting that I hadn't realized had been pressing on me for so long. Lenny helped me see that my anger and frustration were valid, not signs of being difficult or ungrateful. She encouraged me to stop letting my mother dictate my choices and to start setting boundaries, no matter how uncomfortable it might be for her. By the time we left the cafe, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in years: control. For the first time, I started thinking about how I could respond to my mother without resorting to confrontation or aggression. I began envisioning ways to quietly assert myself, to show her that I wouldn't be manipulated any longer, but without creating a scene that could backfire. That night, lying in bed, I drafted mental plans. Nothing drastic or mean-spirited, but steps that would allow me to reclaim my dignity. Paying attention to small details, keeping track of her behavior, and creating situations where I could make decisions without guilt. These ideas swirled in my mind. For the first time, the thought of standing up for myself felt not just necessary but possible. Lenny's words echoed in my head as I drifted off to sleep. You're stronger than you think, Taya. You don't have to let her control you. That reassurance became my anchor. I realized that empowerment didn't come from anger alone. It came from clarity, from knowing my worth, and from quietly preparing to take back control. That evening marked the beginning of a subtle, deliberate journey toward reclaiming my life. The following weekend, I attended another family gathering, a small brunch at my aunt's house. Normally, I would have gone along with every request my mom made, from bringing extra dishes to helping cover minor expenses. But this time, I quietly decided to test the waters, to see if I could assert myself without igniting a full-blown argument. When Darla asked me to pick up the dessert and cover the cost for everyone, I shook my head. I can't this time, I said calmly, keeping my tone neutral. I watched her face closely. At first, she froze, and then she let out a sharp, exaggerated sigh. Oh, Taya, always thinking about yourself. Some people just don't understand family responsibilities, she muttered under her breath, loud enough for nearby relatives to hear. I kept my expression neutral, nodding politely and moving on. Inside, I felt the familiar sting of guilt that she always tried to instill, but I didn't let it control me. Each time she made a passive-aggressive comment or a pointed observation about my supposed shortcoming, I took mental notes, cataloging her behavior. I realized that her manipulations followed a pattern, predictable and deliberate. Later, while helping clear the table, she hinted that I had no sense of gratitude for the sacrifices she had made, her tone heavy with expectation. Normally, I would have argued or apologized to placate her, but this time I didn't respond. I simply nodded and continued my tasks, quietly observing the emotional weight she tried to place on me. After the gathering, I sat down with a notebook I had started keeping. I wrote down each interaction, each sharp comment, and each attempt to provoke guilt. Seeing it on paper made the behavior undeniable. It wasn't about the money or the tasks or even the appearances she demanded. It was about control. Recording it gave me a sense of clarity and power I hadn't felt before. The act of saying no to small requests felt like tiny victory. Every boundary I enforced chipped away at the hold she had over me, and every note I took strengthened my understanding of her tactics, helping me anticipate and plan rather than react emotionally. By the end of the week, I realized that standing up to her in small ways was more than a test. It was training. Each refusal, each silent observation became a tool. I was learning how to protect my peace, how to resist guilt, and how to quietly reclaim authority over my own choices. It was subtle, almost imperceptible to anyone else, but inside, I could feel the shift. The power was slowly coming back to me, one small no at a time. A few weeks later, our extended family gathered for a summer barbecue at my uncle's backyard. The sun was warm, the grill smelled of burgers and sausages, and laughter filled the air. Everything seemed normal until Darla pulled me aside with a tense smile. She whispered that a distant cousin had unexpectedly run into financial trouble and suggested that I cover a large portion of his expenses for the weekend, implying it was my responsibility since I had the means. I felt my chest tighten, but I didn't react with panic or hesitation this time. Instead, I took a deep breath and looked her in the eye. "Mom," I said steadily, "I can't do that. I've supported family in ways that weren't fair to me, and it's not my responsibility to fix issues caused by your choices or anyone else's. You've asked me to cover things before, and it's always been framed as an obligation rather than a request. I won't let that happen again." Her face went pale for a split second, then she forced a tight smile, attempting to mask her shock. She opened her mouth, but no words came out immediately. Around us, a few relatives who had overheard began to glance in our direction, their expressions showing surprise. For the first time, I noticed a flicker of doubt in Darla's confident demeanor. She quickly tried to shift the conversation, laughing nervously and changing the topic to the barbecue food, as if brushing away what had just happened. But I could see her discomfort. She had been used to controlling situations and manipulating responses, and now I had confronted her with truth and composure. I felt a strange mixture of relief and empowerment. The fear and guilt that had once gripped me were gone, replaced by a quiet confidence that I could stand my ground without losing myself. I didn't raise my voice, didn't argue, but my words carried weight, and I could sense the change in the atmosphere around us. Later that evening, as the party wound down, I reflected on the moment. This was different from previous refusals. This was a declaration. I wasn't just saying no to small demands. I was exposing a pattern of manipulation and asserting my right to make decisions for myself. The family's subtle reactions, the way eyes followed us, confirmed that something had shifted. Driving home that night, I felt lighter, almost free. The turning point wasn't a dramatic confrontation or a heated argument. It was the calm, firm boundary I had drawn. I understood, finally, that standing up for myself didn't require anger or retaliation. It required clarity, courage, and the willingness to speak truth even when it unsettled the people I had once feared. For the first time, I realized that my mother's hold over me could be challenged, and that my life didn't have to revolve around her expectations or her need to control. The seed of defiance that had been quietly growing over weeks had blossomed into a firm resolve that I would no longer be manipulated. After the barbecue incident, I realized that words alone weren't enough. I needed a strategy, something that would protect me from future manipulations and give me a sense of control over my own life. I began reviewing my finances more carefully, making smart investments, and ensuring that all my money and assets were legally separate from my mother's influence. Every decision I made was calculated to create independence, to make sure she couldn't pressure me financially ever again. At the same time, I quietly started gathering information about past family dealing. I revisited documents I had found earlier, checked records, and noted inconsistencies in what Darla had told relatives about inheritances and family expenses. I didn't confront anyone immediately, but I made careful mental notes, preparing myself to reveal the truth at the right time. The next family gathering provided the perfect opportunity. While chatting casually, I mentioned a few details about investments and fund distributions in a way that sounded informative, not accusatory. I shared facts about where money had gone, highlighting discrepancies without directly pointing fingers. Relatives began to exchange glances, murmuring quietly among themselves. I noticed subtle shifts, questions, raised eyebrows, and a newfound curiosity that hadn't been there before. Darla's usual confident demeanor wavered slightly. She attempted to redirect conversations, but her explanations seemed thinner, less convincing. The respect in the room subtly started to shift toward me. I wasn't attacking her. I wasn't making a scene. I simply presented truth calmly and clearly, letting the facts speak for themselves. By the end of the evening, I could feel the balance of power tilting. It wasn't revenge in the dramatic sense. I wasn't trying to humiliate her or create conflict. Instead, it was a quiet reclamation of authority, a way to demonstrate that I couldn't be manipulated anymore. Each step I took, from securing my finances to exposing the facts, strengthened my position and earned the respect of family members who had previously turned a blind eye to her manipulations. The satisfaction came in small, almost imperceptible ways. A cousin who had often followed Darla's lead now looked to me for advice. An aunt subtly acknowledged my input on family matters without prompting. I felt a calm sense of power and validation that had nothing to do with anger, just the knowledge that I was finally untouchable in areas where she had once held sway. That week, I understood the essence of subtle, effective revenge. It wasn't about drama or confrontation. It was about preparation, foresight, and strategic action. By quietly establishing my independence and letting the truth reveal itself naturally, I had shifted the dynamics of the family. Darla could no longer manipulate me, and for the first time, I felt completely in control of my own. Over the next few months, I began noticing subtle changes in the way relatives interacted. Invitations were no longer accompanied by expectant looks or whispered comments. When family members discussed money or responsibilities, they asked for my input with genuine consideration, rather than assuming I would simply comply. It felt strange at first, almost surreal, to be treated as someone whose opinions mattered, someone who could make choices without being shamed. Darla, on the other hand, seemed increasingly uneasy. Her usual ability to dominate conversations had diminished. She tried to interject, to assert her influence, but her words were met with polite indifference or gentle redirection. I could sense her frustration and the growing isolation as others began quietly questioning her narratives. She was still present, still attempting control, but the power she once held over me and others had clearly waned. With each interaction, I felt a lightness I hadn't experienced in years. I no longer felt compelled to justify my decisions or carry the weight of unnecessary guilt. Even when Darla made subtle jabs, they no longer penetrated me the way they used to. I had cultivated a space where I could engage with family on my terms, without fear of manipulation or public humiliation. I remember sitting alone in my apartment one evening, reflecting on how far I had come. Pride swelled within me, not arrogance, but a steady, quiet satisfaction. I had learned to assert boundaries, to secure my independence, and to navigate delicate situations with clarity and tact. I realized that the satisfaction of standing up for myself didn't need to involve confrontation or dramatic gestures. It came from knowing I had preserved my dignity and gained genuine respect. Family gatherings became less stressful, even enjoyable. Conversations flowed more naturally, and I noticed that relatives who had once seemed distant or hesitant now included me in decisions and discussions. The shift in dynamics felt validating, confirming that my careful actions had created real change. Most importantly, I felt free. Free from the constant guilt, the manipulative undertones, and the invisible chains that had once dictated my behavior. Darla's presence no longer carried the weight of fear or obligation. Instead, I could interact with her as I chose, calmly and confidently, without letting past patterns dictate my emotions. For the first time, I truly understood what it meant to reclaim my life. Emotional closure wasn't about revenge or proving a point. It was about self-respect, balance, and inner peace. Sitting back and observing the subtle shifts around me, I felt a sense of calm triumph. The years of tension and manipulation had not broken me. They had strengthened me, and I finally stood on my own terms, proud and unshakable. Sitting quietly one evening, I thought back over everything that had happened. The humiliation at the restaurant, the years of subtle pressure, the secrets I had uncovered, and the careful steps I had taken to protect myself. It was almost unbelievable to see how far I had come from the person who once swallowed guilt like it was a necessity. The weight of others' expectations no longer dictated my choices or my sense of self. I realized that betrayal often comes from those we trust most, and the sting of it can be deep. Yet, facing it head-on, rather than avoiding it or letting it fester, had given me unexpected strength. I had learned that standing up for myself didn't require loud arguments or dramatic confrontations. It required clarity, patience, and a commitment to my own well-being. Through it all, I discovered the power of boundaries. Saying no, even in small ways, became a skill that transformed my relationships. I learned to recognize manipulation before it could take hold, and to respond calmly and thoughtfully rather than react impulsively. Each act of self-respect reinforced my confidence, teaching me that my needs and my autonomy were valid, even when others tried to dismiss them. Revenge, I realized, doesn't always mean confrontation or retaliation. The quiet reclaiming of my independence, the careful exposure of truth, and the assertion of my choices had shifted the balance in ways that were far more lasting than any argument could have achieved. I felt an unexpected satisfaction, not born of anger, but from the knowledge that I had regained control over my life and mind. Looking back, the journey had been painful at times, but it had also been empowering. I had transformed the discomfort and betrayal into lessons about resilience, self-worth, and courage. I understood now that growth often comes from facing difficult truths and refusing to let them define or confine you. As I reflected on everything, I felt a deep sense of calm and pride. I had learned to navigate complex emotions and relationships while protecting myself, and I had done it without losing my integrity. My life was no longer dictated by guilt or manipulation, and my decisions were my own. Sometimes the greatest revenge is just living your truth and refusing to let toxic people control your life. Hey besties, thanks for sticking with me till the end of this emotional journey. Imagine being shamed by your own mom for standing your ground, only to discover years of manipulation, and it's painful, but it also sparks strength and clarity. Reclaiming your life, setting boundaries, and protecting yourself can be the most powerful form of revenge. If this story resonated, share, comment, and subscribe for more.